Hello and welcome to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host, Doug Bartosh, also your city manager. And I'm here today with Sergeant Gareth Braxton, and he's our sergeant in charge of the Verde Valley Partners Against Narcotics Trafficking, I guess, team or task force.
Yes.
And so I thought it was a good time of year as we start 2016 to get Sergeant in here to talk about what's going on in illegal narcotics in the Verde Valley and kind of what we all can do to help minimize the use of illegal drugs and minimize substance abuse in the Verde Valley. So with that, let's start off and ask Sergeant Braxton, what are you seeing out there? What's the kind of the current challenges that you're facing?
Well, as you and most of the viewers are probably aware, we have seen a reduction in a lot of the methamphetamine that has been coming into the county over the last couple of years. The unfortunate consequence as a result of that and some of the penalties and consequences for methamphetamine abuse is the rise in other drugs, which would include prescription pills, prescription drug abuse, and as an unintended consequence of that, we've seen an increase in the rise of heroin. It's a challenge for sure, because over the last several years, with the efforts we've made at reducing methamphetamine, people have switched to other drugs to include prescription drug abuse. And Yavapai County served as a pilot county for a prescription drug abuse task force, which included a lot of efforts aimed at educating the physicians, gathering information from the prescription drug database, and educating the doctors that sometimes people would essentially go to different pharmacies or doctors to fulfill those needs. And as a result of those education efforts and enforcement efforts, people have turned to the alternative, which is heroin, which, as you may be aware, that it's really a nasty drug, and there's no quality control, so to speak, and it's not at a physician's recommendation, obviously. And so you see the increase in overdoses that have come at the cost of, obviously, up to and then leading into death.
And I'm trying to remember the number, but it seems like in 2015, we were certainly in double digits in terms of heroin overdoses in Yavapai County in 2015. And I want to say it was somewhere around 12 to 14 overdose deaths that occurred, and literally, many overdoses. And, it's absolutely amazing that this is beginning to take such a hold, not only in Yavapai County, it seems, but really across the nation.
Yes, and you're exactly right. And that's one of the things that we had kind of anticipated with the reduction in the prescription drugs and the efforts we made. And, as recently as yesterday, we had a chance to interview a person that was incarcerated for heroin abuse. And during our interview with this person, we asked, which is what we typically do, what was the trigger? What was the event that caused you to make the leap from what you were abusing to heroin? And it was prescription drug abuse. Started off normal, within legal guidelines, prescribed medication for the pain or some of the issues that this person was having. And at some point, through the efforts of education and pain management, this person was unable to get prescription medication, and through a friend, they were introduced to the idea that heroin was a much cheaper alternative and essentially the same thing, which is one of the things that we're trying to educate people on, is that you really have no idea what you're getting. It's not the same thing as a prescription pill or something that's given at a doctor's recommendations. It's literally something that can take your life on the first occasion.
Well, and I know one of the things that I've heard of, and I certainly know that it's been the cause of many deaths related to overdoses. They're mixing in another drug called fentanyl, I believe it is.
Yes,
and I think that's what took the famous actor Seymour Hoffman, or whatever his name was, back in New York. I think that was what caused his death.
Yes, and that's, you know, another consequence of taking something that's illegal, that's not prescribed at a physician's recommendation, is that, you know, the drugs are, as we see here in Arizona, brought up through Mexico, and it's only as good as the person that you think that you can trust to deliver it, or the contents of it, for that matter. And so if it's too strong of a dose or cut with too much fentanyl, then that obviously leads to the deaths and the overdoses that we're seeing. And we really are trying to get the word out to as many people as that we can reach, that that's not a safe alternative.
You know, and the other thing I have heard too, just yesterday, in fact, was that the amount of heroin coming across the Mexican border over the last year has doubled. Yeah. In terms of tonnage. I mean, you're talking tonnage here, sure, not just pounds. Yeah. And so obviously the problem is increasing, and it seems like certainly there's a profit motive here, sure, from the Mexican cartels, as potentially the legalization of marijuana reduces their, you know, their market in one area. They're looking for another market to try and improve their profits. Is that kind of what you're aware of as well?
Absolutely, and it's the social norming, I think, as the effect of the transition from prescription drugs to heroin, and for whatever reason that notion is out there amongst some people that prescription drugs, it's an opiate-based drug for pain management, and the concept is that heroin is pretty much the same thing, which is certainly not the case, but we have to get people to understand that the opiates and the heroin is essentially the same thing that is causing the deaths. And so it's just, it's a challenge for sure, but it's something that we really want to stress amongst people, particularly within our county, that prescription drug abuse is drug abuse. It really doesn't discriminate whether it's marijuana abuse, if you're using medical marijuana outside of the recommendations of a physician or a person recommending it, or methamphetamine abuse or heroin abuse. We just have to educate people to get those social norms up to say that all drugs are bad.
And certainly as the nation has kind of dealt with the issue of prescription drug abuse by tightening up the ability to shop doctors and doctors prescribing literally hundreds of doses, as that's tightened up, certainly the cost of prescription drugs on the street has increased significantly. And do you see that as a real variable in terms of people turning to heroin?
Absolutely. It's one of the things that we routinely see in our investigations and our contacts with people when we ask what's the price of heroin versus the price of prescription pills. And again, our county has been very successful at stemming the flow of prescription drug abuse. But as a result, that increases the black market and the, I guess, demand for heroin.
So, any ideas on, say, a pill of oxycodone versus a couple of hits of heroin, I mean, do you know what the price difference would be?
Yeah, for prescription pills, it's roughly $8 to $15 for an oxycodone, whereas if it's heroin, depending on a number of different factors, for a gram or for a point, as they call it, it's usually $100.
Wow. So how many hits do you get off of $100 worth?
Well, it depends on the user and their tolerance,
right.
but you know, they all, it seems to have their individual preferences as to whether it's smoked or snorted or injected. So, you know, the person that we had went and spoke to yesterday was using an upwards of $150 worth a day. So it's a very expensive habit, but you know, the consequences that go along with it are really devastating to a lot of people.
I want to come back and talk about how somebody funds a habit like that, but let's go ahead and take our first break and come back and join us.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host, Doug Bartosh, and we're here today with Sergeant Braxton from P.A.N.T, talking about what the latest drug challenges are here in Yavapai County. And before the break, you were talking about somebody you just recently arrested who had a $150 a day habit. Mm-hmm. How does somebody support that? In
a lot of cases that our task force specifically gets involved with, it's for the sale of either heroin, their drug of choice, or other narcotic sales or dangerous drug sales. Some people are actively working and hold down jobs, but by and large it's through the illegal activities, and sometimes that includes other crimes to support their habits, such as thefts or shoplifting, burglaries, things of those natures. As we know, drugs are the catalyst for a lot of different crimes that are committed. They pretty much go hand in hand. But this particular person, you know, and I really just want to stress the fact that these people come from all walks of life. There really is no discrimination in terms of who this drug or any drug affects. It can be a person that is working in our communities and has a stable 9-to-5 job, or someone that has been in and out of prison or jail for a significant amount of time. But ultimately, there tends to be a idea of chaos within their lives when the drug starts taking over different aspects of it. And so some person that may hold down a job and has a good paying job ultimately starts to deteriorate and fall into the traps of having to pay more and more for this habit, because the dependency increases and continues over time.
And, you know, with a lot of addictions, you sometimes hear about functional addicts. And so obviously, you know, you're not going to turn into a raving heroin addict overnight, but slowly but surely, it's just like with any other opiate, you begin to build up that tolerance to where you need more and more to get the same high. And, you know, it exceeds your budget and begins to have physical effects on you. But what do you look for? I mean, for somebody, you know, who you may be living with, who may be related to, you may be working with, you know, what are the signs you begin to look for that somebody may have a heroin addiction problem?
Well, I would say, first and foremost, I mean, everyone knows someone in their community that that they're close with, either related or community member or close personal friend. But typically what we see is changes in behavior, changes in activity, secrecy. Sometimes they'll be withdrawn or have drastic changes in their appearance over time. And it's one of those things where it's just about being connected and being connected with your community and the people that you're involved with. There are a bunch of different avenues and resources that the city and the county, for that matter, has to try to identify and help get these people help if that's the appropriate avenue or venue, to include things like neighborhood block watches. Matt Force does a great job in promoting community awareness events. And in fact, there's an event on the 26th of this month hosted by the Cottonwood Police Department at 6 p.m., which is a community forum to spread the word about some of these issues that we're facing within our own communities. Other things would include the circle of friends that a person has, and just the ability to recognize and identify the people that are around a particular individual. And often it's a change in friends and a change in behavior that are pretty much sure signs of something that may be going on.
You know, and it's interesting because earlier you talked about, you know, there is no particular demographic for this, and these drugs always seem to cycle back eventually. I remember when I started as a police officer in 1975, heroin was big, but it was predominantly big in the low income areas of the city, where now you don't see that. I mean, you see every walk of life using heroin now.
Yes.
And in fact, I would say that it seems like we're seeing a lot more, you know, relatively affluent young people getting into it. That is really kind of distressing to see, although it's distressing to see anybody get into it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One of the things that has come out of this, particularly that led to the jump to heroin, is that this prescription drug abuse. And frequently when I go out and speak to groups, I'll remind them that, you know, regardless of where you live or what your socio-economic background is, if you have prescription medications in your home that you're not using, please get them to a drop-off box. We have them at Cottonwood PD and nearly every municipality within the county, because you never know who has access to those prescription pills. If whether you're a grandparent or a parent and you have young children in the home, we really want to get those unused medications off the out of reach and out of the availability of people that would have a propensity or a chance to abuse those. And so one of the aspects of prescription drug abuse was just what you very well mentioned, was the younger demographic that has or had access to these prescription drugs. And if it's not taken at a physician's recommendation, it's very easy to make that jump to heroin.
You know, and again, we have worked diligently with physicians across Yavapai County to get them to use the state, you know, prescription monitoring program, so they know if somebody's shopping them. We've worked with our emergency rooms to reduce the amount of opioids that they've been prescribing. I mean, it really has tightened it up. Sure. But this is kind of the unintended consequence that we knew was a possibility, and so we're really going to have to get on top of it. Let's go ahead and take our next break, and then we'll come back and talk about what's going on in your neighborhood, and if you have suspicions, what do you do with those suspicions? So come back and join us.
Let me ask you a question. When you think of the American Legion, what comes to mind? Is it our assistance programs that help the spouses and children of our fallen soldiers keep food on the table?
I'm working to help the families of our fallen soldiers know that they are supported and taken care of. I am the American Legion.
For nearly 100 years, the American Legion has been our nation's leading advocate for veterans and their families.
I am the American Legion.
This is today's American Legion.
To learn more, visit legion.org.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me.
Hello and welcome back to Inside Cottonwood. I'm your host, Doug Bartosh, here today with Sergeant Braxton from the Verde Valley P.A.N.T, and we're talking about drugs in the area and probably specifically heroin. And we've seen a dramatic increase in the use and sale of heroin, and so we want to educate the public about what do you look for. One of the things you mentioned earlier, which I think is important to mention again, about the dangers of illegal drugs, is you don't know what you're getting.
Exactly.
And obviously they take a pure product, which I understand, back even a few years ago, the stuff that, the heroin that came out of Mexico was predominantly what they called black tar. And now I'm hearing that that's not the case anymore?
Correct, and it's the quality control. You're taking a drug that's illegal to start with, and you're hoping, and in most cases praying, that what you're buying is what you're buying, and you really never know until, and oftentimes it's too late. And so, unless you are under the guidance and recommendation of a physician through a variety of means to use these type of drugs, particularly opioids or opiates, you're really just rolling the dice as to what you're going to get. And we've seen it countless times over my tenure here that we got a bad batch, or it was cut wrong, or this is the first time.
Well, you never know what they cut it with.
Exactly. And so we really don't want to play those games or take those chances with people's lives, particularly when you realize the fact that everyone has a family member, or everybody has friends or people in the community that care for them. And what you often don't see is the collateral damage that occurs with the family members or the friends that are left behind to deal with the aftermath of an overdose, or in many cases a death. And so it really takes a toll on one's community. So.
You know, and I think that's the other thing is, just like when we began to take on methamphetamines, what we recognized was clearly it can't be just a criminal justice problem. It can't be just a police problem. It's got to be a community problem that everybody takes on, and the importance of getting people educated on what to look for and how to report that is a big help in getting the community involved. So people who live in a neighborhood sometimes I think have the expectation that the police are all seen and that they know everything that's going on. But the reality is the police really do depend on the public that live in those neighborhoods and can clearly recognize what's suspicious or what's wrong. And so what I want to do is ask you, what should they be looking for in terms of illegal narcotics activity, probably particularly somebody who's selling? What would be an indication that it could be narcotics, and what should they do with that information?
Well, there are a variety of reporting options. First, and probably one of the best opportunities is to call the police department within your respective jurisdiction, whether it's Cottonwood or Sedona or Camp Verde or anywhere within the county, and that gets an immediate response by the police. Another option would be silent witness through Yavapai County's reporting system, where you can remain anonymous, and that's one of the covenants of the program. The number to reach the silent witness program is 1-800-932-3232. Another option is to call our task force directly, which is 928-639-6990. And if you have suspicion, one of the probably best pieces of advice that I received when I first started as a police officer was never take anything for granted, never make excuses for people's behavior. Because you see a moving truck in front of a house and people are loading things into it, don't take for granted that they're moving. They could be moving and they could not have authorization to be taking what's being loaded into the truck. And the same thing goes for activity within your neighborhood, whether it's drugs or anything else related. Particularly with drugs, indications of sales would be people that don't particularly fit within your neighborhood. And what I mean by that is, in our communities, particularly in Cottonwood, we should all have an idea of who our neighbors are, whether we've only seen them in passing or we've had formal conversations with them. We should know who belongs there and who doesn't belong there. Within the aspect of drug sales, what we typically see are a high volume of vehicle traffic, foot traffic, or people that are just coming for short periods of time, which is an indicator that it's not a party or gathering, especially if it's over a consistent basis and no specific pattern to it. People that are just coming there to buy drugs and then leave. And I think that just goes along with the sense of community and knowing who your neighbors are, and who do you regularly see at your neighbors' houses or within your communities. And I think within Cottonwood we do a really good job of that, but we can always do better.
And I think that's what you said is really true. I think there's always a tendency to try and justify the behavior, and not call the police, and because there's this feeling that they're going to get somebody in trouble, and that's really the only person who's going to get in trouble is the person who may be robbing your neighbor's house or buying drugs. And but generally, if I had a neighbor who called because they saw something suspicious going on at my house, I think I'd be the first one to go over and tell them thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate you looking out for me.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we stress as a police department is we would much rather come out and investigate a situation where it turns out to be nothing than to have a house burglarized or a person overdose or a community nuisance where people are selling drugs out of the home, but we weren't called to it. And so we really take ownership of our neighborhoods, and that's one of the things we want to stress to people as well is because if it doesn't make sense to you, let us go out and check it out. That's what we're required to do. That's what we swore an oath to uphold and to do, is to protect the citizens in the community. And so we really want to get out and investigate those incidences. And it turns out to be nothing. That's even better. That's a win for everybody.
And just recently, to maybe clear this up, we had somebody concerned about what may be drug trafficking based on shoes hanging over a wire. And do you want to, I know there's a background to that, and,
Sure.
and that may have actually been happening at one time, I think predominantly in the East. But
Yeah, years ago, early 80s, mid to start of the 90s, that was predominantly on the East Coast, places like Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey. You would see it as a frequent occurrence. Here on the West Coast, I haven't seen it. As many as my counterparts haven't seen it as indicators of drug use or drug sales. But what I can tell you we have seen are the things that we mentioned, people out of the ordinary in your neighborhood, or that frequent traffic at different times of the day and night, whether it's vehicle or on foot, and just getting to understand and know who your neighbors are and who the people are within your community.
that just about does it for this session of Inside Cottonwood. But I'd just like to close by saying it really is important to get to know your neighbors, understand what the patterns are in your neighborhood or on your block. And if you see something that's suspicious, and if it's suspicious to you, it's important enough to call the police department and report it. The officers know how to handle it. They can come out, they can be very cordial, particularly if it's no criminal activity going on. But it's a great way to make sure that your neighborhood stays safe. Secondly, we'd love for the whole community to get involved in this issue. It's a very important issue for our community and for Yavapai County. And so, as Sergeant Braxton mentioned, on January 26th from 6 to 8 o'clock at the Cottonwood Police Department, we're going to sit down and just have a community conversation about heroin use. Talk about what it is, how can we prevent it, what treatment options are available, and come up with any other strategies that may help us in reducing the illegal use of this drug, and again, the harmful effects up to including death that occurs from the use of heroin. Thank you for joining us on Inside Cottonwood. Thanks to Sergeant Braxton. Come back and see us again sometime.